Welcome to the Accountants Expo podcast, where we create light bulb moments for our listeners by exposing the journeys, secrets, and insights of some of the top players in accounting. This podcast is brought to you by Michael Edelstein, Director and Founder of Recruitment Expert, a specialist accounting recruitment agency working across Australia, New Zealand, and Asia Pacific. Hi Alistair, thank you so much for making the time to join me on the podcast today. Now, we met through the Accounting and Business Expo gang not that long ago, and I remember I asked you what the title was of your presentation. It was quite a catchy title. Can you enlighten me and the rest of the gang here?
The title was really around how you use marketing and business development to assist with the retention and attraction of the best human talent available, which is rather a mouthful, but I think it probably delivers in terms of it does what it says on the tin, as we say in marketing. And for the last 2 years, most managing partners or leaders of firms haven't necessarily wanted more work, but they have wanted more people.
Because they're getting so much work as it is.
Because they've had so much work on. So they've struggled. In many cases, I've seen accountancy practices have to turn away very profitable consultancy gigs because they just don't have the humans to do it.
100%.
Pass it off just to keep the clients happy.
It's a unique perspective that most accountants wouldn't quite see the nexus between, BD and staff retention. Can you kind of elaborate, shed some light as to what that connection actually is, and what were the major takeaways from that presentation?
I did some research, and I think this came from banks, where they said that in exit interviews, 48% of people who left accountancy practices left because it was unfulfilling work. And I think 45% left because of culture, which is a massively overused word in 2023. So I'm kind of thinking, well, if you're trying to attract people to your firm and they decide they don't like it because it's unfulfilling work, maybe you didn't sell them the dream. Maybe you weren't truthful in the interviewing process. And as you will well know and be well placed in the roles that you do, the power, if you like, has completely changed in a period of 3 years. So 3 years ago, if people went for an interview at an accountancy practice or a legal firm, the firm probably felt like they had all the power and didn't need to sell themselves that hard. It was down to the candidate to sell themselves rather than the firm to try and sell the role. And I think we find ourselves in a completely different place now.
100%.
You've got candidates who've
it's a
got
candidate's
two
market.
choices, and it's up to them. And I came across a situation where a large firm, probably a top 10 firm here in Australia, advertised a management role for an accounting practice, circa about 130,000, I think. And they only got something like 3 applicants, and yet a smaller regional practice put the same role on with the same title at the same money and got 20 applicants. So why does that happen? Right? And the answer is that they're better at the marketing of that position and how they do that. And
mind you, probably only one of those applicants was even in Australia that had the right experience out of the 20 or the 3. But
I don't think.
But the concept, you're right, is you have to market.
I don't think firms are prepared if a candidate turns around and says, "Why should I come here? Because I've got 3 firms to go to." I don't think they answer that very well. I don't think they take the opportunity. And there are a number of basic ideas that I think they need to put in place. And, we could talk about this for hours, but it usually starts with, you've got to sell someone the dream. Why do you, I hate to bang on about, certainly for younger people who are maybe looking to a full-on career. Everyone's familiar with Simon Sinek and his golden circle.
Yeah.
What's your why? Why do you exist beyond making profit? So younger people are it's important to them. So we talked about the culture word, but it's more than putting beanbags in the breakout room. Right? There's a lot of things go into that, and how you motivate and all those kind of things. And in terms of growth, accountants are hugely over-reliant on referrals to grow their practice. And you don't do work that's worthy of a referral if you've got staff who are just doing a job and go there 8:30 to 5:30, do a job and go home. You need people who are motivated to run through walls for you. Well, to do that, they need to feel part of something bigger than just being on their own. And so, when it comes to interviews, people should be selling them. We've got a strategy at this firm. This is, I don't know, let's pick a number, right? So let's say we're a firm with, I'll pick a figure, 40 staff. So we're a firm with 40 staff and we turn over $10 million, and this is what we do, but we've got ambitions to, take that to a headcount of 60 and a turnover of X in a 3 to 5 year window. And we're looking for great candidates who can bring these skills to help us grow and take us on this journey. Right? So you sell someone that it sounds interesting, and then there needs to be training and induction programs. There needs to be, just basic things. Even like in induction, people very rarely get decent, almost like manuals on the way they do things, and it tends to be, right, here's your desk, you know how to do this, not yourself,
100%.
that kind of thing. And those days are gone. You've got to engage people much better.
We still have plenty of firms that...
Sorry?
we still have plenty of firms these days, the smaller ones especially, where they just say, look, we don't have time to train anyone junior. Or if they hire someone that isn't like 100% can hit the ground running and is 100% familiar with all the systems and processes, then 2 weeks later, it's like, look, they're not good enough. We're going to have to terminate them. So we've had a fair bit of that. It's actually it's an interesting transition now where to a degree, it's the first time I'm actually getting a little bit of concern because I'm seeing the trend line a lot more now. Where
people are doing unfulfilling work, they want to know when they join what type of work they'll be doing and what type of clients they'll be doing it for.
That's for sure. Like for the great candidates, 100%. Like what you're right. When you get multiple offers, your offer is going to stand out because you've sold them some sort of future that's exciting. It's not stagnant. But also what I was saying before is like the alarming thing that I've noticed speaking to clients at the moment is they've outsourced and offshored and automated a fair bit now over the last couple of years, especially because they've struggled to get talent in public practice. Where now when we introduce junior talent to them, they're like, can't be bothered training them, too much, blah, 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 don't have the resources for it, can't take my seniors' billings away, to train someone. And we've got a great offshore team that does all the junior work. So it's kind of making me a little bit concerned about the next generation. Like, they all want seniors now because that's kind of where they're lacking, but like, no one wants to hire the grads anymore, or the juniors even, because that can be done from Philippines and India for a lot cheaper, and it's already been set up. So it's very interesting how that's going to affect.
Well, there's a huge amount of firms that I go to who have a generational issue now. So guys who are my age in the late 50s, who've got the name above the door, are ready to pass on the baton, but they don't always have the people ready and available to do that, who either A, want to take it on, B, have the cash to buy the equity. So there are some challenges, and getting next generation people who are talented is not easy, which is why I guess you're a very popular guy right now. Because if you can supply people with good human talent, you'll be very popular. But finding them is one thing, keeping them is another.
100%.
And if you're taking more senior people at partner level, and you go, most people will say, well, what size is your practice? So someone will sit in an interview chair and they'll say, oh, well, Michael, I've got $1 million practice. Okay, well, you come to us. How much do you think you'll be able to bring over? And they'll confidently claim they can bring half of it at least, if not more. But I find clients very sticky and they don't always come. So you're then into, well, people have anxiety when they move between one firm and another because they're never taught how to grow a practice. So if they can't bring across the clients that they've already had, one of the ways, and again, how does marketing and BD affect it? Well, if you have marketing and BD coaching and training in your organisation and the other candidates' options don't, then you will be more attractive to them because you don't just put them in the chair and say, we'll leave you to it. We say, well, actually, we'll hold your hand and we've got access to people here who can show you how to do that. So, I've joked with you before, I failed my accountancy exams. I'm Spartacus. But I do know that when I was there, no one ever taught me how to grow a practice. So I have huge empathy with people.
But basically, the crux of what you're saying is, in order to attract and retain talent, you do need to have some sort of ambition and growth in place.
You've got to have ambition, growth. You've got to have a strategy that's turned into a story, which is shared internally and externally, because if you don't share it internally, and often that requires you to share financial data with people. I often go to firms and there's an us and them There really is, between the fee earner and the fee burner.
But what does that mean? Sorry, Alice, to interrupt. But what does that mean for a typical practitioner in the suburbs that is running good practice? They're growing a little bit by year, but they don't want to take over the world. Like, they're kind of happy plodding along, but they still need good, reliable staff.
They do, and not all staff want to go and work for a top 20 firm in the CBD anymore, because they either don't want to make the commute or they don't feel it's necessary, because even if you work for a top 20 firm, you're not required to be in the office 5 days a week anymore.
Yep.
So that actually becomes a problem in geographical areas. So if you go out of the CBDs and you go to maybe up the central coast or the Sunshine Coast in Brisbane, people who previously recruited seniors because they were doing the commute for years and didn't want to do that and wanted to go and move back home where they were brought up out in the suburbs, that doesn't happen as much anymore because they're not required to be in the office anymore.
We talked about that, that's driving up salaries
everywhere. This is an interesting thing. But if you're going to, nobody wants to go for a firm that's just going to sit there and be the same as it's always been. But even, do you have a bio page on your website where you share, here are the people that are going to be in your team, who you're going to be working with? Here's an example of your clients. Have you got any clients mentioned on the website? What type of industry sectors do you specialize in? What type of work are you particularly good at doing? Everybody has a song to sing.
So basically put out specifics in some way, shape or form to basically differentiate you from every other place. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because your clients, your personal history, what you're doing with your practice, on a small or a big scale, does differentiate you. And those could be the things that resonate with that candidate.
Well, we live in a world that I call DEB, which is the world of the digitally empowered buyer. So if I come for an interview at your organisation, I'm going to Google you before I get there.
Yep.
No one buys anything over $500 without Googling it first. And I certainly wouldn't go for a job interview without Googling it first. So your first impression is really what people find on first page of Google. So usually your website will be number one. Number two might be LinkedIn profiles. Number three might be an organisation like Glassdoor. So it's important that, people are talking about you in positive light. Even down to Google, I see accountants that have 0 Google reviews.
And if they do, they have really shocking ones.
They've got 5 and they've got 3 stars.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone did something bad, but they've never asked enough good people to put good things on to
level it out.
Out of the way. So,
all the time. That's like 99% of accounting firms, actually.
So
I actually still have clients that don't have a website, by the way. And they're running great, successful practices, usually regional areas with 10, 15 staff. But it's like, why do we need a website? Everyone knows it's on my to-do list, and they've been saying the to-do list to me for like the last 5, 10 years.
Well, I think everything comes back to client service. So everything I talk about, marketing and business development, people try and complicate it, but it's really client service multiplied by relationship building, and that's it. There's no more mystique to it. People overcomplicate it and fear it, and lots of people in law and accounting who are introverts, academic introverts, think they can't do it, but that's just not true. There's so many things that they can do. But if firms want to be more successful in recruiting the best people, then they need to tell people, if you come here, there is a pathway to partnership, and we will help your education process by pushing you in certain areas and making things, having KPIs and metrics beyond just billables.
Alistair, you've got, I guess, a unique slant to you where you always focused on professional services rather than your typical accounting advisor or coach to the industry or in the industry that just does accounting firms. But you've actually done law and accounting because it's professional services and they're kind of like a brother-sister company or industry. And you've also done that across the UK and Australia for well over 10 years. Now, is there anything that is like, does one market, i.e. do law firms approach things very differently to accountants? And is there something that accountants can learn from the way law approaches it?
Okay, I have to be careful what I say here.
Yes, you do. It's all right. Only accountants will listen to this, surely.
Well, I'll be honest. So I've always taken the view that accountants were better business people than lawyers. But over what I've seen...
Is that before you started working with accountants?
No, it's not before. But that was just my impression, because accountants dealt with businesses about business things more so than lawyers did.
Yeah.
And they got into the numbers, then I thought that they would be better. But that's not necessarily so anymore. And you have similar challenges in that you're trying to become visible and credible to target markets, referrers, all that kind of thing. But where most accountants are fortunate, unfortunately, leads them to complacency. And I've seen this hugely as a result of COVID. So because there's 3 pots of revenue in a professional services firm. The first pot is the recurring revenue, which accountants have more of than lawyers, because lawyers don't have that much money on retainer. Whereas accountants tend to be, unless you're rubbish, you'll keep your tax clients who come back every year. And, in larger firms, you'll keep your audit client unless you, for whatever reason, upset them on service. So you have a big recurring revenue pot. Then you have the pot in the middle is the responsive pot. So when the clients get busy, you get busy, but you don't necessarily affect it. So during COVID, accountants were hugely busy because they were being asked to administer government schemes and all this kind of stuff, and people needed assistance. So they got busy, but it wasn't of their own making. And the third pot is the proactive revenue, where you put your flag in the sand and go, this is the type of work we're good at. We make good money on it, margin on it. These are the clients we want to work with. We're going to go after them. And because that's the most difficult pot, people don't go and play in it. Whereas lawyers, there's much more transactional. A case starts, a case finishes, even if it takes a couple of years. But yeah, they have to go out and kill to eat on a more regular basis than accountants do. So they have to get more astute at it. Whereas accountants, for me, are a bit more reserved and complacent, because they can be, because they know that, even as long as they do good things, they should get most of the revenue back next year. But when I go and do away days and partner retreats, and I go, okay, what's the goal for this year? +5 and +10 is incredibly popular. But you can grow a business by +5 or +10 by not fundamentally changing anything you do. Just because one of your bigger clients has a busy year, you could become very busy as a result, and you would hit +5 or a +10. It doesn't force you to actually do anything different, really. Google and Apple don't sit in a boardroom and go, oh, let's grow by 10%. They have a thing called the 10X project, where they're trying to completely review what they do to expand the business tenfold. And most people don't have the ambition to do that. They're pretty safe in what they do.
Okay. But is there a different approach to marketing or business or staff retention that you find, differentiates the way law approaches it versus accounting, or is kind of much of a muchness?
No, I think it's much of a muchness. They all have a challenge of, most organisations rely on too few people to introduce new clients. So
is there a cultural difference between the two? The way they run, the way they manage their staff?
Who's that?
Is there a cultural difference between the way they run or manage their staff?
I think some law firms are perhaps worse on the fee earner versus fee burner mentality, even to the extent where I've gone to firms where they're across 2 floors, partners are all on one floor, minions all on the floor below, which kind of is an example of the culture that they all say they don't have anymore, but it's there. Where I would suggest accountants are probably less egotistically driven like that. But the challenge is still there. They all want to, they all sell, and the bigger the firms, the more services they're trying to sell. And it's really, it's an old broken model. But if you're trying to sell, I think officially, lawyers and accountants sell somewhere between 1.7 and 2.7 services per professional services client. But if you look at a website, they all sell between 8 and 20 services.
Yeah, the bigger ones.
So they've got heaps of stuff they could do, but they're not very successful at, doing that. And there was a time where that one-stop shop model was considered to be attractive, but in a digital world, it just isn't. Because if you want the best tax lawyer in the country, he might be here in Sydney, but the best property lawyer's in Perth. So you don't all necessarily have to be in the same geography anymore, because we're using Teams and Zoom and all these new modern tools.
So you're saying don't go for the one shop, one
I think
stop
it's very
shop?
hard to sell that model. So let me give you some other examples.
Because I know there are firms that are actually going towards it and doing it successfully.
If it's driven by the client asking for it, that's a different thing.
Because the idea is, like, the beauty of being an accountant or a lawyer, but especially accountant, is if you can address all of their needs in one place, then you make it easy for the client, and obviously you can extract significant value beyond just the tax return from that one client without having to
it's
market.
funny, there lieth the model of the big four.
Mm.
They wanted to be an expert in everything for everybody, and they've become behemoths. But as a result, the old way of doing business. So when I started work in 1983, just to show my age, and I started in a bank, in any given town, the banker and the accountant and the insurance broker and the lawyer all got together, and they were the masters of what went on in any geography. And then more recently, basically, the accountants didn't refer anymore because they did this, and they went, we can do all this ourselves, and that's flowed down through the sizes of firms. And I actually really value that old style network. I think it's fantastic. If I was an accountant, I'd absolutely be making friends with bankers and lawyers and insurance brokers, because all businesses need them and they don't compete. Well, I don't see that they compete. I think most accountants have bolted a wealth management business on, and rightly so. If you help create someone's wealth, then there's no reason why they shouldn't measure it and take the personal thing.
Yep.
But in terms of, I've recently come across some accountants who've bolted on some lawyers.
Yeah, lawyers and other whole digital marketing services as well, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not...
Basically, anything a small business needs, they can provide
I think
and
the digital
service,
marketing service is good if they are genuinely good at it.
Because I'm thinking of like Blue Rock and Business Depot. Those are the two kind of names that come to me where they've gone for the one-stop shop model.
Yeah, but they'll have a certain type of client, and it won't be a sophisticated, large corporate client. They're not going after ASX.
No, it's always SMEs. Yeah.
So again,
100%.
it'd be driven by the types of clients that you want, I guess.
Okay.
But generally, the model's polarizing between top and bottom. So even in the 13 years I've been doing this with professional services firms, the top of the market. So let's take cars, for example, right? So Ferrari and Porsche can sell lots of cars around the world, and Tata of India can sell lots of entry-level cars around the world. But in between time, Ford and Holden tried to be everything to everyone in that middle ground in Australia, couldn't make any money, and were forced to stop production. But nobody wants everything for everybody anymore. It's too complex a business. It's very expensive. It's hard to do. It's not good. If you take my wife's industry, which is luxury retail, Louis Vuitton and Hermes and people like that can sell lots of high tag kit. There's Supre and Lowe's, there's a market for it, millions of entry level products. Myers and David Jones try to be everything for everyone in the middle. They don't make any money. It's a burst model. So I don't want professional services firms to be this middle ground shop for everything, because it's kind of passé as a business model.
So basically go for niching.
People want an expert in 2023. It's very easy to find who they are. And therefore, I'm always encouraging people to aim for that model.
Okay. I mean, we talked about it, like a person that you've been interviewed by, the legal loan guys that are literally just mortgage brokers for lawyers. We talked about how there's an accountant that all he does is, a recruitment agency, for example. And they're all having pretty good success,
Well, as long as the market you choose is big enough.
Yeah.
So, I'm happy that I don't just do law or just do accounting, and I manage to do barristers and engineers and other people. Because you learn stuff, and it just keeps you sane as well. But it's about you learn what works and what doesn't work in similar places. And, with the best will in the world, lawyers and accountants are very risk averse. And, if you're looking for creativity in how to go to new markets, there are other industry sectors out there with more ideas than lawyers and accountants have got, with the best will in the world. And it's weird because when you go to the recruitment of marketing and BD people in professional services firms, lawyers will always say, well, unless they work for another lawyer, we're not taking them. Or unless they've worked at an accountant, we're not taking them. But as a result, they get very tunnel vision of, what
you just keep doing whatever everyone else is doing. Yeah, keep doing what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between how UK approaches things versus how Australia does things? Like from your experience with law and accounting?
Well, I have to qualify this by saying it's 10 years since I left the UK. But I try and keep on top of what goes on, not just in the UK, but globally. And I spend a lot of time researching every week on what new hints, tips, tools there are that people are using successfully. The latest is ChatGPT, and I don't know, we might have a short conversation on that in a moment. My glib response to you is that people in the UK and North America were ahead of what goes on here in Australia, because I'm going to be controversial and say the GFC missed this island for the similar reason that at the moment it's still the lucky country, because there's so much minerals and stuff in the ground that the rest of the world wants. You haven't gone through real recession. Right? And there'll be people on the call say that's not fair, but I'll give this as a story. So in the year before I came here, 928 law firms went bust in the UK. Can you imagine if that happened here? Right? It's just off the scale, right? So you had to learn pretty quickly in the UK at the end of the GFC on how to win new client revenues, or you were in a world of hurt because the world wasn't there. Whereas here, there was enough transactions going around mining and other things to keep the business going and keep people, with a living. So I don't think there was a requirement here to be that good. There was still this duopoly kind of mentality where, there's enough to go around for everybody and don't rock the boat. I think now, digitally, Australia's reasonably good. I think the pace of the internet connection is not great, and that holds you back. But I think there's 1,500 legal tech businesses based in Australia and New Zealand, which is outstanding for a country of its size. And maybe that's because we feel very remote here on this big island. We're a long way from everywhere else, so we've jumped into the digital opportunities that are there. I don't know.
Okay. Now, being in the position you're in, you get to speak to a lot of accounting firms and law practice as well, but just from an accounting perspective, what are the biggest issues you see in your typical, small to medium accounting firm?
Beyond people,
because that's universal and will always be probably a universal issue.
Well, when it comes to marketing and business development or growing a practice, the pushback I get the most is time. Obviously, we haven't got any time. And if you look at the most successful people on earth, their relationship with time is very different to those people who don't have a good relationship with time. So when I do strategy things with people and I put plans together, I always say to people, it's probably going to take you a minimum of 2 hours a week to grow a professional practice. People say, oh, well, I'm already doing 50-hour week. I can't find another 2 hours. So part of me says, well, go and do your outsourcing or whatever, and find yourself 2 hours, but also think that 15 minutes a day gives you 90 hours a year. So I usually encourage people to find a 2 hour window in a week, usually a Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday. I don't like Mondays and Fridays. Mondays tend to be very reactive to client issues that have arrived over the weekend. You get a lot of phone calls and emails and stuff. And Fridays, we're just human, right? We've got one eye on other things. And if you're in a law firm, a lot of conveyancing and stuff goes through on a Friday, so people get busy. So let's avoid Mondays and Fridays. So I'll try and put a 2 hour window, and I'll try and encourage you to do it over lunch, 12 till 2. And put it in. Tell your EA, tell your secretary, don't book client time in that 2 hour window, because I'm just going to progress what I need to know I need to do to not just be in the business, but grow this business. And people get more done in 3 months than they've got done in the last 3 years by having that discipline. So business development, it's more about being consistently good than being occasionally spectacular. Right? You just got to show up.
And what sort of things would you get them to do during those 2 hours? And generally, what sort of strategy should they be following? Well,
the people who succeed, and that's based on, I'll just wave this at you. So this is a research I did where I asked 150 accounting and law firms in Australia and New Zealand how many hours and how many dollars they invested to win ideal profitable clients. So that's 124 pages of raw data, as you people like to call it here. And that told me that the good people speak, write and network on and offline better than those that don't. Right? And then within each of those headings, there's probably 10 things you can do within it. So we haven't got time to go through all those. What I might do, though...
But give us the most actionable ones.
Sure. So speaking is big. So whether you have a seminar where you feel more comfortable and you invite people into your space, whether that be your boardroom or a hotel that you hire or whatever, is a good one. For me, by a country mile, speaking at conferences and things like that, in terms of quality, is as good as it gets. The other thing is, if you're time poor, try and give you some working examples. If I go and speak at a conference, I did one recently in New Zealand. There were 279 CEOs and managing partners of firms in the room.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke for an hour. I took 2 days out of my diary to do it. So I started a relationship with 279 firms. So what people need to understand is that business development is not a one-off event, it's a process. So people will often say to me, Alistair, I speak, but I never win any work.
Yeah.
Right, so you need a hook. Right, so when you've finished speaking, I will say something along the lines of, if anybody have found this particularly useful, I'll give you a free 1 hour diagnostic session with your partners at next month's partners meeting. And 79, I think, of the 273 people in the room came down the front, gave me the business card and said, yes, we'd love one of those.
You were a very busy man after a month.
How many do you think won the free hour out of 79?
Tell me.
10. Well, I nominated 10.
Yeah.
Right? I think 9 took it up. And of those 9, 4 became clients. 2 of them are still clients ongoing. Right? So we're talking tens of thousands of dollars, but I only gave up 2 days.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that all those, the 79 people who gave me the card all go in the database. It doesn't always happen immediately, but I talk to them every month with good content. So things happen over time. And I know that if I get a free hour with people in a diagnostic session, 50% or more will become ongoing projects.
But you're good at converting though as well.
So this is another thing. So accountants and lawyers are unsure whether they have a marketing problem, i.e. they can't get meetings with ideal clients or referrers, or they have a BD or a sales problem, but they hate the S word. So you wrap it up and you call it business development, but it's a very different thing. It's a conversion problem. And most professional services firms actually have a sales problem. They don't have a marketing problem. So today, Friday, all around the CBD here in Sydney, there'll be lawyers and accountants having flat whites and beers. And not a lot will happen as a result because they've never been taught what to say at those meetings, right? So they give a history lesson of their organisation. So it started 100 years ago in a shed in my grandfather's back garden, and we've now got 4 offices in 3 states and 20 partners, and we turn over 10 mil. So what? Right? It doesn't pass the so what test because people don't buy professional services firms on longevity.
Yep. So what's the right way to do it?
Well, people want to know why you're different. So there tends to be 3 questions you've got to find an answer to. The first one is why do I need your product or service at all? Right, so that sounds obvious. If you're an accountant, people will be listening saying, oh, well, it's a compliance issue. You have to do it. Possibly, but think about all the other things like management accounting or outsourced HR or outsourced payroll. Under what circumstance? What problems have I got that needs me to know? And sit in a dark room and don't come out until you write them down. Because these are the things that you do webinars about or write articles about or make videos about. Because that's what people are interested in. So it drives your content calendar on the types of marketing that you do. So that's an important one. The second one, and this is the big one, is why should I use your organisation rather than someone else's? Right?
Yeah, because it is a commodity, right? Accounting services.
Yeah, so are you more friendly? Are you quicker? Do you outsource and pass that on to the client? Are you better value for money? I have to tell you, service is where it is the big differential. Right, the clue's in the title, professional services. But most people don't even measure it, so they can't manage it. So, I'll often go to managing partners and go, okay, tell me the reasons why I should come here. And they give me value and price. And I go, no, because there's always a clown in town who'll do it cheaper than you. So we'll put a line through that one. Then they go, oh, well, the work that we produce, the team's really skilled and the quality of work's great. And I go, well, I never meet a managing partner who's told me they're rubbish. I have once, having done about 250 firms, I met one once who'd had too many beers in a conference in Melbourne, told me he thought his team was poor, but that's the only one. And then you get the ubiquitous, Alistair, they come to us because the quality of our service is superior. And I go, well, prove it. And they go, well, we can't. And I go, well, do you not measure it? Do you not have a client satisfaction program? No. And I just want to pull my hair out. So again, you asked me before for a difference between the UK and Australia. That's a big one. Because in the UK, most professional services firms, 90% plus, will have a feedback system. It doesn't happen here. Now, I don't know why that is. No, service generally, I have to be careful here, is not that great, right? Now, whether that's because we don't tip, I don't know, but if you walk in a Myers or a David Jones, ask yourself if you feel important. Right? It doesn't happen very often. So the other way where people in accountants and lawyers miss out is that when someone scores you a 9 or a 10 out of 10 in a client feedback survey, it's the best time to ask for a referral. So you miss the biggest trigger moment you're ever going to get because you never create the opportunity by asking, which is madness. So this time of year, I've had a few recent, in the last 3 weeks, I've done one a week probably, where I've done an off-site client review with a professional services firm, and I pull people's leg and I'll say, okay, how many clients have you got? And they say, I don't know, a couple of hundred. Okay, let's go around the partners here. How many of those clients did you ask for a referral from in the last financial year? 0, 1, 2, 6, 2. Right, I might get to 20 if I'm lucky. And they've got hundreds of clients, and I go, well, you're telling me that you grow this practice through word of mouth referral, but you don't ask them, so you'll be waiting an awful long time. So there was you'll be familiar with Bain and Co, one of the world's biggest consultancy firms, and they were rather sneaky. They asked hundreds of managing partners of firms whether they thought they were worthy of a referral, and 80% of the managing partners said yes, and they said, we don't believe you, give us your top 20 clients and we'll phone them. So they did, and only 14% of the clients agreed that these firms were worthy of a referral. Now that's a huge chasm in perception about how good you think you are versus how good you actually are. Now, when most people say we don't want to ask because someone might say something bad, well, they might, but it's pretty important you find out why, because then you can put it right and it won't be bad anymore. But people fear it, and it really shouldn't be done. It's probably...
Have you seen firms implement that? And
wow, yeah. So,
and what have been some of the outcomes?
Okay, well, I can't name the firm, but the first firm I worked with here and implemented a net promoter score system saw referrals go up 40% in the first 6 months.
What did that equate to from a financial perspective?
Well, 7 figures.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, it's quite a big firm. It's quite a big firm, but it just went through the roof because, well, two things happened there that weren't happening before. One was that we weren't asking the question. And what it did, it forced partners to go out and actually go and visit their clients at their clients' premises. Right? So the other thing it goes hand in hand with is the client review meeting. Yep. So again, right, this is not service, right? You go and see a client and you go, here's your annual accounts and here's your tax return, just sign that, send it back to me, thanks very much, see you next year. That's not worthy of a referral. That's, 5 out of 10 compliance. What people listening today need to understand, if you want to get to trusted advisor status, which is this holy grail that everyone chases, you need to understand what the top 3 drivers are of that business this year. So you need to go out and see your top clients and say to them, what are your top 3 goals for 2024? And try and see how you might be able to assist them in making that happen. Yep. So, I should be able to say to any of the people listening, go. If I asked you if your top clients, if I went to the CEO and asked them what the top 3 goals are, could you tell me? Because that's the level that you should know. And people go, "Oh, Alistair, I know my clients. I speak to them every week." And I go, "Well, you might, but that's probably about a certain transaction or something. But what do you really know about them? What drives them? What's driving the business? What are they like as people outside of work?" That's where you really find. But you need to invest time to do that, and because it takes time, people put it off.
So you go and basically. So are you saying you recommend doing it when?
Well, at this time of year,
you're presenting like the tax and financials, or during a tax planning meeting, or?
Well, at this time of year is the perfect time to do a top 10 review, where you actually ring your clients up and you go, "Look, we've been great clients of ours for 3, 5, 20 years, however many it is, but we'd love to sit down with you and do a bit of a review about our service, and we know quite about the business, but we don't really know about you."
Is that free? Are you charging them for that 1 hour review?
Well, if they're a top 10 client, I'd do it for free because I'm almost guaranteeing you that work will come out of the hour. Yeah. That's where you'll make the investment.
So but generally, you would basically call them and say, "Hey, look, it's just want to have a review, basically, of your business, see where we can add value. Completely complimentary, blah blah blah." Go out and actually have a chat to them.
If it's a top 10 client, I think people probably do this now, Michael, but they do it as random acts of coffee and lunch. Okay. So they go and see people once a year and buy them lunch, but there's no business agenda on that. It's let's go out and have a beer together, enjoy each other's company and build rapport, which is important. But if you can bring value to that meeting by asking good questions and getting people to think about things, how you can help them in other ways, that's truly valuable to both parties.
And then at what point do you ask for a referral, though?
Well, it depends where the conversation goes. It's not all just about asking for a referral. It's more likely to be upselling or cross-selling your colleagues or another department or another service stream that you can offer them that will assist them. Because quite often people just go, oh, I didn't realise you did management. Oh, I knew you did management accounts, but I didn't know you did wealth management because I don't put you in that box and you've never told me you did it.
What if you were like a typical smaller practice, like bread and butter, business services and tax, 20, 30 staff, that kind of stuff? What are they doing? Because that's the bulk of accounting firms. It's that 10 to 30, 40, 50 kind of staff, but all they do is business services tax. And yes, there are some bolt-ons, some might do audit, some might do financial planning, but really 90+% of the revenue is business services tax. So how would they approach this kind of...
Well, this is quite interesting. So I meet accountants who tell me everyone's been saying that for the last 10 years, the future of accounting businesses is not in compliance, it's in consultancy services. And I meet other people who argue vehemently that that's not the case, right? So the money's still always going to be in the compliance angle. And, let's be honest, we've been hearing for 10 years that technology is going to replace the accountancy world, and we're still here. And
I've been hearing, it's the same as recruitment. I've been hearing that recruitment will be replaced for the last 20 years.
Yeah, I've been hearing billable hours will be disappearing. Well, they're alive and well, people. They're like a cockroach. They're alive and well. I think officially 84% of professional services firms still is in billable hours.
Have you seen firms do away with timesheets and still be successful, or is it still comes back to that?
But you could count them on one hand.
Yeah, and is it because from a recruitment perspective, I do see firms trying to kind of please the candidate by saying we don't do timesheets, we're a great firm, you should work for us, kind of thing. But I've spoken to so many clients where they've tried it and they say, look, it comes back to that old saying, you should measure whatever you want to manage, basically. And I can see the issue that if you have no idea how much that job is costing you and how efficient your staff are, then you can't really run your business properly.
Well, that's the issue. So many practice management systems will tell you who your top clients are on billables, but if you ask them to do it by profit, you might get a very scratchy response. And clearly, if you don't measure inputs, it's hard to gauge whether it's been a successful client or not.
every other business, you would need to know your costs. Like, you can't produce or manufacture anything unless you know what your input costs are, right? So it makes sense to do so, to apply the same logic to...
I've recently worked with a client who everything is on fixed fee.
Yep.
Everything is done at the start of the year. So you decide whether you want to be a silver, gold or platinum client.
Yeah, which is a typical approach that's been happening in the industry for the last 5 years.
And that works for them.
Yeah.
And I guess they'll have some knowledge or not. A CFO shared with me last week a really detailed piece of analysis where they worked out one job they'd done on fixed fee. They'd only returned, or it worked out that they'd charged the client $9 an hour over the year. If only someone had done that exercise a little earlier. So the answer is yes, it does happen, but the way you charge for your fee should be client driven. So bizarrely, some clients still like the transparency in the billable hour. Some clients still want it.
Really?
Yeah, you do hear it. I do hear it. So not everybody wants fixed fee. The other perception is that fixed fee is only good for the client. But that's nonsense, right? People think fixed fee, smaller margin, people know what they get, no surprises. That's nonsense, right? If you could double your fee, it'd still be a fixed fee. Why not? But then it would be in the favour of the firm rather than the client, perhaps.
Yeah.
But people's perception is that fixed fee means lower margin. It doesn't, or it shouldn't do.
There's nothing wrong with fixed fee at all, as long as you know what the cost is to produce the piece of work for that particular client.
Sure, but if you're an accountant, you've been in business for 3, 5, 10, 20 years plus, you should know, on average, how many hours it takes to produce certain outcomes.
For that particular type of business and that volume,
And if you're an expert in a certain industry, you should know what the asset pool is, how long it is to audit it, all that kind of stuff. You should know these things.
Yeah. So in terms of like the things that hold them back from doing all the things that you mentioned about BD and marketing, which, as you said before, it will help them grow the practice, it will help them retain the staff, it will help them attract staff. What's holding them back from, or what are you finding is holding them back, A, from doing it, but B, even like from some of the things you're suggesting them to do?
It's quite funny, right? This is one of my diagnostic tools, right? So this is the top 20 issues I see in professional services firms. Now, I'm conscious of time. We haven't got time to go through all of these, but see if you recognise a few of these. A few partners generate the majority of the new business. We rely heavily on word of mouth to grow revenues, and to make matters worse, staff very rarely ask for referrals as they don't know how or when to do it. Cross-selling is a goal of the practice, but it doesn't seem to happen. We don't maximise the potential of latest technologies such as blogs, podcasts, online video, social media, etc. Most people don't have good CRM systems, as that doesn't help. We find it difficult to get in front of potential new clients and referrers and struggle to turn leads into fee-paying work. That's a big one. No formal referral strategy in place with joint venture partners. Huge opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I might just stop at that point. You know, the network thing's massive. And accountants usually go networking at, as I say, generic meetings never really get the best out of them. Best network you'll ever have is your own. But you can only put a good network together when you know what your ideal client looks like. Because you don't know what they need and who else is going to be useful to having a network to get to them. So professional services is my thing. So on the third Wednesday of every month, which was this Wednesday, I have monthly meetings with the head of professional services at a top 4 bank, the head of audit at a top 5 accountant who audits law firms and law firms only, and the head of professional services at one of the global insurance brokers who specialises in professional services.
Mm-hmm.
So none of us compete, but they've got more clients than I can ever shake a stick at. So all we do is have something to eat and a drink and enjoy each other's company and open doors and invite each other to each other's events and share relationships and knowledge. A lot of accountants don't do that. They just have a generic, they go, like I say, they go to BNIs or they go to Chamber of Commerce, right? But to show my age, you go back to the Top Gun 1986, there's a lovely line in it that goes, Mav, this is a target-rich environment. Right, so I know where lawyers and accountants and bankers and engineers hang out in groups, and therefore I know where to hang out, because every time there's a coffee break or a lunch break, the room's full of people who I can help. If you go to a BNI with a butcher, a baker and a candlestick maker, and you're not likely to find that many ideal clients. So you've got to go where you think these people meet in groups, and that's where you need to put your content. If you've got a content marketing program.
But does that only work for niche accountants? Or would that work for, a generalist accounting firm?
It does work for both, but clearly it's going to be, the more targeted it is, the more likely it's to be engaged with. But everybody needs to do it. I don't make the rules, Google do. If you want to get found on your website, you need to write articles. It's that simple.
100%. Okay. And you mentioned, I think one of your points that you just did read out from the diagnostics was the partners are the main kind of revenue drivers. I guess what could what should partners be doing to kind of change it, if they should change it at all, but also what could a staff member do to improve in those areas? Because most people do assume it's up to the partner to do BD. Like, I'm just here to do the compliance work, but should that kind of perspective be addressed and changed?
Okay, so you can imagine that I go to firms and sometimes HR or someone will say, Alistair, we want you to work with the next gen. The partners are okay, right? Now, I actually find that not all the partners are okay. Some people are successful despite themselves, or have inherited some relationships that mean they have a good practice, but they're actually not great marketers or BD people. So I don't want to excuse the senior people, but I think they have a value, and younger people need to understand you need to find a mentor, really. And I think that's where young people missed out really badly in COVID, because if you're sat on the couch at home in your pajamas, how do you learn how someone deals with a client who's having a difficult conversation, or or how to onboard a new client, you just miss out on those conversations. You couldn't follow or be mentored. So I think that was a real miss. So that's why I'm actually a fan of people getting back in the office. I think you learn more in that environment.
100% through osmosis. Yeah, even if it's 3 days a week, like you should be there.
Agreed. But younger people need to understand that if you've got ambitions to not just have a job, but have a career and take a pathway to partnership or whatever, at some point you're going to be expected to be able to introduce revenues to a business. And that usually involves networks. So start your own. As I say, if you're a young accountant and you're only 3 years out of accounting school or something, there will be other people in other firms and businesses and law firms and banks who are in exactly the same position as you. So start something. There are young professionals groups, I know, but there's no reason why you can't start your own.
Yeah. They're the guys the ones that do it proactively at a young age. They're the ones that become partners in under 7 years.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure they do.
Like 5 years sometimes, because they're just they're a gun. They go
Here's
out.
a reason why you
network.
might want to do it. I don't know if this will come across very easy.
Yep.
So that is 7 years ago, that accounting firm were all using Excel spreadsheets. And now that's their technology stack for marketing and business development that produces millions of dollars a year. So the goalposts have moved, right? You can't just say, oh, well...
By the way, for everyone watching, there was Salesforce in the middle and there were about 10 plus other pieces of tech attached to it.
But the idea is there's lots of tools and tech to help you now. And to just bury your head in the sand and say, I'm not going to go and investigate it, is poor. So...
but
Alan, the guy who does all the technology consultancy, Alan Fitzgerald, he's based in Melbourne. I don't know if anybody's listening and you want to work out what the best technology is for your firm and practice, or if there's any technology that will help the problems. If you ring Alan up, he'll tell you what's available and which one he thinks you should choose. He does charge a fee, but my God, what an interesting...
Does he specialise in accounting firms?
Yeah, he just does it for accountants.
Okay.
He's an excellent service, and those guys exist in law as well. So I know 2 or 3 people who do exactly the same in law, because there's so many different platforms and technologies available.
There are. It's overwhelming sometimes. Yeah.
Sorry.
I said it's overwhelming sometimes because of how many there are.
Totally. So he's a real good guy, and I recently referred one of my small practices in the inner west suburbs here in Sydney to him, and phenomenal. So real helpful stuff.
But also,
the ChatGPT thing we touched on, people will say to me, oh, we haven't got time. And I go, well, have you looked at ChatGPT? Oh, well, I haven't had time. And I'm like, well, it's chicken and egg.
Yeah.
So at some point, if you don't make it your priority to go and find out what's there to help you, time will always be against you.
Sorry, just to kind of round back to the conversation we were having before, getting your staff and putting the responsibility on them, is that something that you've seen being executed successfully by accounting firms, where you've conducted the training to teach the staff how to convert better, how to market, how to network? How did you turn a non-BD introverted accountant into a sales machine, and then B, what sort of results have you seen from that?
Okay, so first of all, I'm realistic. So if you give me 10 people, 3 or 4 will eat out of my hand and do what I tell them. Another 3 will sit on the fence, and 3 will fold their arms and go, no, I'm an accountant. It makes me feel desperate, cheesy, salesy, and I'm not doing it. Right? So I don't try with those 3. Right? There's no point. It's like pushing water uphill. So, but professional services firms people tend to be quite competitive. So if you start putting metrics in around these things, when you have your monthly meetings, you start putting some metrics up about, how many events people have done, how many videos they've made, how many LinkedIn posts they've done, how many articles they've written, that type of thing. People don't want to be at the bottom. So, and the other thing that happens is people can see who the active people are and usually see the effect that's having on their practice, i.e. it's booming.
Yep.
And they go, oh, I actually want to be part of that. So maybe this is for me. So you get people who were once reluctant because they thought there was no value. The other thing is, people invest the time or money in the wrong things. So if you go back to that research document, the top 3 wastes of money in a professional practice were advertising. Right? So I'm not going to say glibly all advertising is bad, because again, it depends on the client. But if you go and ask, again, walking down George Street in Sydney, if I went and asked 100 business owners, can you name any accountants outside your own or the top 4, they'd probably struggle. If I asked them to name the top 4 law firms in Australia, they wouldn't be able to do it. So they might be able to name an ambulance chaser like Slater and Gordon or Shine, but beyond that, it wouldn't happen. And then, so you've got that. There's no point doing it, right? So if I go to the airport, you go up the escalator at the lounge, there's always a law firm or an accountancy practice who have that advert at the top of the escalator. Now, that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but it changes every year, which tells me it doesn't work. Because if it did, they'd never change it. They'd just sign up for another year and another year, right?
I mean, advertising works from a Facebook and Google ads, especially if you're a niche player. That works.
Yes, if that's niche, that's something quite different. But again, go back to probably only 3% of people are looking for a professional services provider today. 97% of business owners are happy with the incumbent. They're not looking.
Yeah.
So what I work with people on is how you become visible and credible to the 97% of people who aren't ready to buy today. Right? The 3% who are ready to buy today, that's AdWords. Right? Which is very expensive, and usually people who are price driven and want it now. Right? What I'm trying to do is build a relationship in advance of a cash transaction taking place, so they know that if I want an accountant or a recruiter or an engineer or a barrister for this issue in the future, I'm going to choose these people because they've demonstrated to me they know more about this topic than I do. And what that requires is to take you're not selling time anymore, you're selling your intellectual property. So I'm encouraging people to put it in platforms and share it in places where people can access it before they pay cash for it. It's almost a try before you buy, right? But you're not doing the whole thing. You're just putting bits in places. And, it's much more complex than it was a generation ago even, because there's so much noise now. There's so many more platforms to do it on. So, my mother, who's 86, she wouldn't use an accountant unless I introduced her, and her son made a personal introduction to someone. She might then choose that individual, because that's the way that generation works. I've got guys in the building I live in here, .com boys, who just walk around like this all day on an electric device. If you're not found on your iPhone, then you don't exist. So as a marketer of a firm, it's much more complex than it was even 13 years ago when I started out doing this, because there's so many more tools to use.
So what's the strategy then to get your young people on board with that? Like, should you start at a graduate level? Is it after they've done this EA 3 years in that you start to teach them that business development side and get them out networking?
Well, a lot of it is to demystify it. So like I say, it's not this horrible salesy thing. It's just client service multiplied by relationship building. That's it. So clients need all these services, or they need the services you provide, but they don't access them all because they don't understand them. Which is why things like diagnostic tools that I use are so key, and I'd encourage accountants to start them, because people don't know what they don't know. If you go and ask most business owners about the financials, they don't know. That's why I employ you as an accountant to do it, right? But if you go to people and go, right, these are the top 10 financial issues that most people have in organisations like yours, which ones do you have? People will go, oh yeah, that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem. So you might say, right, we've got cash flow problems, but you haven't talked to them about that before. So they might go, right, okay, we need to work with you on putting a cash flow plan together. Or they might say, I haven't got visibility, I haven't got the right data to make boardroom decisions in my monthly partner meeting. Okay, we need to give you a management account and explain to you what's available so you can make better decisions based on fact rather than gut feel. There'll be certain things you can help them, but I guess we've gone off at a tangent. Coming back to the young people and how do you get them involved, you tell them that it's not that hard or difficult, but there is a methodology to it, and dedicate the time. Here are the things that work, and again, so dependent on who the clients and referrers you're trying to reach out to, I usually give people a menu of about 20 different routes to market, and you choose the ones that you would feel comfortable with dependent upon your personality and skill set. So I'm not going to ask everybody to go out and do public speaking, because I know that certainly young people, they'd scare them to death.
So basically what you're saying is you get some people in the office that might do your LinkedIn articles, some will do webinars, some will do the networking, because whatever is suited to their personality. Yes, there's not one kind of size fits all.
But it needs a plan. You can't just, pull it out of the air. It needs,
and you probably will do some, role play and some scripts and basically give them specific examples of
Well,
what
quite
natural
often
stuff.
people reach out to me and they go, "We need more work, Alistair." And I go, "Okay, well, that's tactics, really. But tactics are supposed to be supporting the strategy. So usually we have to go backwards and start asking questions about what type of work do they actually want to win? Because not all client work is equal.
Yep.
Right? Some clients are different. Some types of work are more profitable than others. So if you're time poor and you've only got 2 hours in a week to grow your practice, you may as well try and win the type of work with the type of clients that's profitable, not just $190 HR block tax return type stuff, right? That's not what we're trying to win. So we have to theme all our marketing around the certain types of revenue streams we want to win. So it takes a bit of thought.
Makes sense. As I'm kind of conscious of the time as well, so what's the best way for accountants to get in touch with you if they wish to learn a bit more about your services and what you can do for them?
Well, I'd point them to the website first. So that's professionalservicesbd.com.au.
Yep, we'll put that in our show
there are
notes.
heaps of articles and videos and podcasts and all sorts of things to gen up on there. And there's also a downloadable ebook there called 10 Immediate Actions to Generate Revenue and Cash. And people usually get quite a lot of value out of that, so that's a good place to start.
Excellent. Couple of rapid fire questions. What's your favorite quote?
You don't learn anything while you're talking.
What have you read or watched or learned recently that's had the biggest impact on you?
Well, I've started following an American guy called Zane Khan.
Yeah,
every day,
I started following him as well.
So he sends me stuff about AI and ChatGPT every day because I don't have the time to do the research. So he does it for me and sends me a list of all the good applications. So I'd say that's pretty impressive right now.
Okay. What have you bought recently that's had a tremendous impact?
Business-wise, I've started using a facility called Vidyard, Vidyard, which allows me to record the screen and send it to people. So instead of following people up with a text email, I send them a video, and everybody loves it. Okay. So people who've gone quiet on me, and everyone I think has that time when a client goes quiet or a prospect goes quiet, instead of sending them an email, I send them a video and I get a response all the time.
Of you talking to them?
Yeah,
or
talking as I am now. So I might go, "Hi Michael, it's a shame we haven't been able to connect. I apologise if I've dropped the ball on this, right?" And in the background I'll have their homepage of their website or their LinkedIn profile. So when they open the email, it's like, wow, what's that? That's our website, right? So it makes people...
And then your face pops up in the middle.
Yeah.
Cool. And you find that conversion rate for that is very high.
It's huge compared to normal email.
What book or book should accountants be reading?
Well, when I started, and again I might be showing my age here, I read all the David Meister books.
Oh yeah.
So you're laughing there, so that might date me slightly. But he did the Trusted Advisor and how to managing the professional services firm and all that. But they were good, and I still think a lot of that content's probably still relevant in 2023.
Okay. Last question. Who would you want to have a drink with the most in the world, past or present?
That's tough. I do like military history, so I'd kind of like to speak to a Churchill or a Napoleon.
Which one?
I don't know, probably Churchill because I'm English.
I was going to go for Napoleon. It sounds more fascinating.
Well,
but both of them were amazing.
He's got a film out, so maybe we'll just go and watch the film instead.
What would you ask him?
All the W's, why and how and when and
any in particular that have always intrigued you?
Now, actually, I can answer this separately, right? So if I was to ask a really difficult question, I have to be careful here. This is a good way to end. Dwight Eisenhower, in 1946, made a speech about the industrial warfare complex and how it drove the world economy. And it's so relevant to what's going on in the world now. So I'd maybe put Dwight Eisenhower in the chair and ask him about that, and then maybe ask someone today how relevant it is today. So there's a deep, meaningful way to finish a conversation.
Sounds good. Alistair, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, cheers, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in and hope you enjoyed this episode.
Please like our podcast and share it on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or wherever it is you hang out so more people can benefit from these speakers. Also, please subscribe on our website so you get all of our latest episodes. And if there's anything else I can help you with, or you have speakers you'd love to hear from, or some feedback about the current episode, please feel free to send an email to michael@recruitmentexpert.com.au. Until then, take care, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future.